So this week is week 2 of a 3-part series that we are doing called Zion at its Best. And just in case you weren't here last weekend, let me kind of catch you up as to where we've been so you understand where we're going. When I first got here only a few weeks ago now, I did a little very informal and very unscientific survey. We're just in casual conversation. I talked to people and I asked them, okay, so what do you love so much about being here at Zion? What is it that you think makes Zion the best? And this series is actually based on those responses. This series is a product of your feedback to me. And so last weekend, we kicked off the series, and far and away, the number one answer I got from people was this: when you're at Zion, you kind of feel like you're family. And so we talked last weekend about being a family of faith and how no matter who you are or what you've been through or are going through, there's still room in this family for you. We are here for you. We love you. We want to support you and be there for you. This weekend, we're going to talk about another response that I got a lot of, which was this: Zion has not only an incredible family of faith, we also have an incredible legacy of faith. And by the way, I think that's absolutely true. 140 years, it's hard not to have a legacy, right? After 140 years. In fact, one of the things that I did just this past week is I walked through the halls of Zion. Have you noticed all the stuff on the walls? So many memories, so much memorabilia that are a testament and a testimony to all the faith formation that has happened in this place for 140 years now. In fact, I walked up the hallway. If you walk up the hill on the campus, there's this one hallway that we have that is lined with confirmation pictures from kids and years and decades past, confirming and affirming and professing and confessing their faith in Jesus Christ. I did a little thing. I counted all the pictures on the wall. You know how many confirmation pictures we have? 116. Took a while to count them. And by the way, that doesn't even count all of them because some of them were from so long ago, they didn't even take a picture. And so there was just a plaque with several years and several classes right there on the plaque. We have an amazing legacy of faith here at Zion. I noticed another picture on the wall that I wanted to show you. I saw this. It's a line drawing. And those are 3 out of the 4 spaces that we have worshiped in over our 140-year history. It's an amazing legacy of faith. Or how about this line drawing that was right next to it? Those are all 4 iterations of the school that we have here at Zion. For generation after generation, we've been passing down the faith. It's an amazing legacy of faith. And it's actually that legacy that I want to talk to you about today. And to do this, we're going to walk through and work through that story that I read just a few minutes ago from Joshua chapter 4. Now, I'll begin just by setting a little bit of context and giving you a little bit of history. The book of Joshua is about the life and times of one of the great leaders in the history of the nation of Israel, a guy named Joshua. And Joshua was actually the guy who led the people of Israel into a place that back then they called the Promised Land because they believed that God had promised it to them. Today, we call it the nation of Israel. And as the book of Joshua opens, the Israelites, all 2 million of them, are getting ready to enter into this land that they've been waiting to get into for a very long time now. And they're right there on the eastern border of the Promised Land, on the eastern side of a river called the Jordan River. Maybe you've heard of it before, but the Israelites have a problem. It's springtime, they want to get into the Promised Land, and they are so close, but at the same time, they are so incredibly far away. Because every spring, the Jordan usually floods its banks, and maybe it was probably like 100 feet wide at this moment. And back then, there was no bridge that you could, drive over the Jordan River using. There was no ferry service that you could sail through the Jordan River using, and with 2 million people, that would have taken forever anyway. And so the Israelites were stuck right there, wanting to get into the Promised Land, but not quite able to make it into the Promised Land until something incredible and miraculous happens. Because there's this group of priests, spiritual leaders in the ancient nation of Israel, and they're carrying something called the Ark of the Covenant. Now, this was a beautiful box, gilded in gold, where the Israelites proclaimed that God was enthroned. And the priests were carrying this. If you've never seen it before, here, I'll help you out. Go watch Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, okay? You'll see a great depiction of it, okay, if you want to know what it looks like. And so these priests are carrying this ark. What they do is they step up to the banks of the Jordan River. And as soon as they dip their toe into the water, a miracle happens. Joshua 3, beginning at verse 15, as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream, just like that, stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away, and all the people were able to cross over on that day. The priests, they step into the middle of the Jordan River, and it's almost like God puts a divine dam just right up the Jordan River. You can look, and a great distance away, there's this big old wall of water. The river stops flowing. All the Israelites walk right through the riverbank, and finally, these people are able to enter this promised land. Now, it's this background that takes us to our story for today from Joshua chapter 4. Joshua 4, verse 1, when the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord comes to Joshua. He says to Joshua, here's what I want you to do. I want you to choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe. The nation of Israel was divided into 12 tribes. And so God says to Joshua, okay, take a representative from each tribe, 12 men, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, where the priests are standing with the Ark of the Covenant, and carry them over with you and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. And so God says to Joshua, tell these guys, I know they just come out of the River Jordan, but go back into the River Jordan. Go to where the priests are standing, and everybody pick up a rock and then bring it back to wherever you're going to camp. And that's going to be the center of your camp. It's not going to be a campfire. It's going to be a giant boulder. And so, verse 4, Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder. Now, when you really pause to think about it, this is actually a pretty incredible feat in and of itself, because we don't know exactly how large these stones were, but we know they probably weren't like small, okay? Joshua was not putting together a pile of pebbles. Each of these stones probably weighed, 200-300 pounds, and so think about that. You got to walk 50 feet into a river, 50 feet out of a river, carrying this big old rock on your shoulder. This was not only a command from God, this was a workout by God, right? But it was a workout that came with a purpose. And here's the purpose. Verse 6. These stones are to serve as a sign among you. Because in the future, your children may ask you, hey, what do these stones mean? And that's when you tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. And then this beautiful line, these stones are to be a memorial. They are to be something that you hold in your memory forever. Here's what God is doing with Joshua and the Israelites. He's crafting and creating a brand new legacy. And here's what a legacy is, just so we're all on the same page here, okay? A legacy is simply a memory that is precious and has an impact on your heart and on your life. And in the time that we have remaining in this message, I just want to talk to you about that. Why is it so important to have memories that are precious and impactful on our lives? Why is it so important for us as the church, just like Joshua did with the Israelites, why is it so important for us to craft and create a legacy? 2 reasons. First reason is this. The reason that we want to craft and create a legacy is because we believe the past matters. The reason we want to craft and create a legacy for us as a church and even for you personally is because we believe the past matters. You guys may know the old saying. Those who don't remember the past are doomed to what? Repeat it. Okay, maybe you know someone who's not very good at remembering the past, and so they make the same mistakes over and over and over again, right? They fall into financial, dire straits, and they don't learn from the past. So what do? They just turn around and make the same poor financial decisions again. Or maybe you know one of those people who always seems to be in a relationship, but it's not the good kind, it's the bad kind, right? They always date somebody who's totally toxic. And you think, when are they going to learn from the past? But no matter how many bad relationships they're in, they just get into another one again, because those who don't remember the past are kind of doomed to repeat it. Now, you look here at Joshua 4 and you go, yeah, but how in the world could anybody ever forget about an event like this? Like, why do you need the rocks to remember? I mean, if you see a big old wall of water and God making a divine dam in the Jordan River, are you ever going to forget that? Because I don't think I would. In fact, back in the late 70s, there were a couple of psychologists. They wrote an article on something they called flashbulb memories. And flashbulb memories are events that are so significant in our lives that we never forget where we were and what was happening when we first heard about whatever was happening was happening. It's kind of like our mind almost has a little flashbulb in it. It takes a picture and it sears the memory in our brain. Now, if you're here this morning and you have no idea what a flashbulb is, because the only picture you've ever taken is on your phone, okay? Let me explain this. You can ask your grandma, your grandpa, your mom, your dad, okay? They used to have these things called cameras that were not on your phone, okay? They used to put film inside of them. Ever heard of film before? Okay? And then on the top of them, there were these flash bulbs that would, go off with a flash of light to make the picture a little brighter and look a little bit better. And sometimes our minds will do that. It just sears an image, sears a moment in our brain. And you would think that a wall of water in the Jordan would be one of those flashbulb memory moments. But here's what psychologists have also discovered. Even those moments and even those memories can fade and become fuzzy with time. There was another really interesting study did back in 2003. A group of psychologists took 569 college students, and they asked them about an event that was a flashbulb memory moment for everybody, something that happened 2 years earlier, September 11th, 2001. If you were around, you remember where you were, what you were doing, what you were thinking, what you were feeling when that happened. Well, they asked these college students, just 2 years removed from this big event, do you remember watching the footage live on TV when the first plane crashed into the first tower of the World Trade Center? 73% of the college students they asked said, yes. There's a problem. TV cameras were not rolling live footage of the first plane crashing into the first tower of the World Trade Center. There happened to be some firemen around who happened to capture that footage, but that didn't emerge until the day after, but only 2 years removed. These college students had forgotten what they did, it didn't see, because even with a flashbulb memory, those things can fade and become fuzzy with time. Here's what Joshua doesn't want. He doesn't want anything to fade. He doesn't want anything to become fuzzy. And so he sets up this monument on the banks of the Jordan River, these 12 stones, and he says, this is going to help jog your memory. This is going to help keep things clear. This is what I want you to remember, because the past and what God has done for us in the past matters. In fact, Joshua takes it a step farther, because not only does he set up one monument on the banks of the Jordan River, he sets up another monument in the middle of the Jordan River. Joshua 4, verse 9, Joshua set up another 12 stones at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood in the middle of the Jordan River. There were rocks on the side of the Jordan River. There were rocks in the middle of the Jordan River, so that nothing would fade from memory. Because Joshua believes the past, those memories, those legacies, they matter. Deuteronomy 32, verse 7. Remember, don't forget. Remember the days of old. That's the first reason it's so important to craft and create a legacy, because it helps us remember the past, and the past matters. Second reason it's so important to craft and create a legacy. It's because not only does the past matter, the future matters. Sometimes, maybe this happens to you, I know it happens to me, we can be tempted not only to remember the past, but to get stuck there, to get stuck in the past. So we're just about a month into a home that we moved out of in San Antonio and then into here in the Georgetown area. A new home, right? It's a good time to do a little bit of rearranging and redecorating. We're living in a rental home in Georgetown Village. We like it a lot. But as we were getting everything set up, my wife Melody, she came up with a brilliant and bright idea. For years, we had always had a recycling bin right inside the door of our pantry. Okay, and so whenever I wanted to recycle something, drink a bottle of water, just open the door of the pantry and throw it in there. But Melody came up with a new place, a better place for the recycling bin. She put it right next to the trash can. Logical enough, right? Right? It's new, it's different, it's better. Brand new way. Here's the problem. The new way was not the old way. And so for a week and a half, here's what would happen, okay? I'd finish up a bottle of water, open up the door to the pantry, just toss it in there, and I'd hear it go clunk right there on the tile on the floor. Grab a stack of papers, open up the pantry door, just throw them in there, and they'd slide all over the pantry floor. Because I wasn't just remembering the past, I was stuck in the past. And you know the saying, old habits die what? Hard. And I was having a hard time breaking an old habit. Here's what happens when we get stuck in the past. Sometimes we get so stuck in the past that we can even use the past to begin to curse the present. We've probably all done this, right? We'll yearn and reminisce about the time that prices were so much lower, right? Wasn't that nice? Or the traffic on I-35. Man, it used to be so much lighter. Or the values and morals of society. They used to be so much nobler. Now here's the thing, all of that might be true. But here's the question we need to ask ourselves. What good does complaining about any of that actually do? Here's another question to ask. What if instead of using the past to curse the present, we actually use the past to bless the future? What if instead of just complaining about how low prices used to be, we teach future generations about the value of hard work and earning a dollar? We're complaining about the traffic on I-35 and reminiscing about how light it used to be. We teach future generations about the value of wide open spaces and a slower way of living. What if, instead of just pining for the way that morals and values used to be, we take those morals and values that were gifted to us and we seek to share them with the next generation, because you know what? They worked well, and they'll work well again. I'm of the firm opinion that the most important legacy that anyone can have is not the one that they've inherited from the past. I mean, that's an important legacy, don't get me wrong, but the most important legacy that anyone can have is not the one they inherited from the past, it's the one they'll leave for the future. So we got to ask ourselves, what kind of legacy do we want to leave for the future? How do we want people to remember us? As people who were grouchy and upset and bitter and frustrated and resentful? Or as people who were gracious and kind, sympathetic and loving? Just like the one we follow. The legacy we leave, my brothers and sisters, matters. Because the future matters. In fact, here's how much the future matters. There's this kind of interesting timestamp on this story in Joshua chapter 4 when the Israelites cross the Jordan River and they begin to go into the promised land. Joshua 4 verse 19 says, on the 10th day of the first month, that's when all the people went up from the Jordan into the promised land. Now, in our modern day calendar, that'd probably be somewhere right around the beginning of April. But here's why this time stamp in Joshua 4 verse 19 is so important. It actually points to something in the past. Because a little over 40 years earlier, the Israelites were stuck in a centuries-long slavery in Egypt. And God comes to the leader of Israel at this time, a guy named Moses. And he says, I'm going to use you to free the people of Israel out of this slavery that they're suffering through. And I'm going to begin a brand new legacy when I rescue you and the Israelites miraculously. And this is a legacy I want you to remember. This is a legacy I want you to cling on to. And so just like Joshua and the stones, where the stones help Israel remember, God gives to Moses and Israel something to help them remember. But it's not a pile of rocks, it's a whole meal. God calls it the Passover meal. It involves a lamb and some bread and some wine. And God gives instructions for this Passover meal. Here are the instructions that God gives. Exodus 12, verse 3. Why don't you look at this on the, when? 10th day of the first month. Just like with Joshua at the Jordan. Each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the members of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and on the tops of the doorframes of the houses where they eat the lambs. And this is a day, God decides to say, that you are to remember. It's a brand new legacy. Don't forget. And the Israelites don't. Year after year, decade after decade, century after century, even millennia after millennia, they gather on the 10th day of the first month to remember what God has done. Until about 1,500 years after this very first Passover. The 10th day of the first month rolls around again, and so all of Israel gathers again. And in Israel at this time, there lives a man named Jesus. And what Jesus does is he gathers his followers. He has 12 of them, 12 disciples. And he says to his disciples on the 10th day of the first month, all right, it's time to go. It's time to make preparations for the Passover. But on this Passover, Jesus does something different. Because when he celebrates this Passover with these disciples, here's what he doesn't say to his disciples. He doesn't say, okay, I want you to remember Moses and how he led the children of Israel out of slavery. That was important. But that's not his focus. He doesn't say, okay, I want you to remember Joshua and how he led the children of Israel across the Jordan River into the promised land. That's important. But that's not his focus. What Jesus says on this day, during this Passover, is here's what I want you to remember. I want you to remember me. Luke 22, verse 19, do this in remembrance of me. And here's the reason this is so critical. When we remember Jesus, we don't just remember someone who lived a long time ago in the past. When we remember Jesus, we look to someone who can actually give us a future. Because let's be honest about something. The past is kind of a mixed bag, right? Yeah, we got precious memories, things we love, but does anybody in here have anything they'd kind of rather forget? Anybody at all? Most of it happened in college, right? The mistakes you made, the sins you committed, the betrayals you engaged in, all the guilt, all the shame, all the pain that comes along with all of that, it all kind of sits back there in your past, and if you're not careful, it can kind of weigh you down in your soul in the present. But when Jesus comes along, and when Jesus says, I want you to remember me, what he does is he removes all of that from you, and in exchange, he gives you a future. A future that is full of forgiveness. And a future that is full of life. And a future that is full of salvation. And you know what I believe? That future, your future, matters. Zion. We have an incredible legacy. We really do. Our historic sanctuary is an incredible legacy. This worship center is an incredible legacy. Our world-class school is an incredible legacy. We have a fundraiser at Zion that is so good that we decide to do it twice a year, right? Speaking of which, okay, deadline for the orders for your sausage. PK would want me to tell you this, okay? Next Sunday, get them in, all right? And if you want to sign up to serve, the boards are in the lobby, please do that. All of that's an incredible legacy. It's also not our most important legacy. You know what our most important legacy is? This. Because when we cling to the cross and cling to the one who died on it and rose from it, what happened 2,000 years in the past becomes our hope for the future. That's a great legacy. In fact, you know what? That legacy is the best.